I drained my saving to fund my boyfriend's dream. When he accused me of using him, I finally walked away. I'm 29, female. I grew up counting every penny. That's just who I am, the practical one, the planner, the woman who always had her finances in perfect order. But I somehow found myself pouring my entire life savings into someone else's pipe dreams. Looking back now, I can't believe how many warning signs I ignored, how many times I convinced myself that emptying my bank account was just another form of supporting my partner's ambitions. My boyfriend Nick and I started dating in summer 2014. He was the eternal optimist, living a comfortable life as an only child from divorced parents. We both had good jobs, our own places, and enough money to enjoy life. He had all the toys, a fancy sports car, gaming computer, even a purebred dog. I had just graduated and landed my first real job. Those first 6 months were pure bliss. Then January 2015 hit, and everything changed. Nick lost his job, wrongfully terminated by a new supervisor who was clearing house to bring in his friends. The government sided with him on unemployment, and he decided to focus on finishing school instead of job hunting. That's when the cracks started showing. Nick was supposed to graduate that May but failed a class. Then summer school. By June, his savings were gone, and he faced a choice: car payment or rent. Since his lease was ending in July anyway, I offered to cover his rent until he could move in with me. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Then came another setback. Nick needed one more elective to graduate. Fall semester it was. I insisted he get a job to help with expenses. 6 months of supporting him wasn't part of my plan. He landed what seemed like a great position with a reputable insurance company in late July. The catch? Commission-only sales. Being the optimist Nick was, he bought into all the manager's talk about unlimited earning potential. I paid for his certification tests, and he started trying to build a client base selling financial products. But the reality was harsh. He'd make $700 on a small sale, then nothing for months. Building a financial client base from scratch, with no connections or family wealth? It was brutal. By September, we had to downsize from my nice downtown apartment to a place on the edge of town. I burned through $3,500 on overlapping rent and deposits. By November, my savings were gone. I had to tap into my family trust fund early, taking a penalty since my grandfather had set it up to be accessed after age 25. By December, I was down to $300 in savings and had spent about $17,000 supporting us both, covering his business expenses, client lunches, and both our dogs. The fights about money and chores became a broken record. I expected him to handle most of the housework since I was paying for everything else. He never stepped up. Instead, he'd repeat the same lines his manager fed him. It'll get better. Everyone struggles at first. Once I make it, we'll be set. Every single time. 2 weeks before Christmas, it all came to a head. We were standing in the kitchen, having the same fight we'd had 100 times before. I just need a little more time, he said, leaning against the counter. The business is about to take off, I can feel it. I slammed my hand on the counter. That's what you said 3 months ago. And 6 months ago. I can't keep doing this. Baby, you don't understand how this industry works. Everyone struggles at first. No, I cut him off. Don't feed me those lines again. I can't pay the bills with potential and promises. What do you want me to do? He threw his hands up. Quit? Give up on my dreams? I want you to grow up and face reality. I'm drowning here. I grabbed my keys and stormed out, supposedly to buy cigarettes. As I sat in my car, thinking about crashing at a friend's place, it suddenly hit me. Why should I be the one sleeping on couches when I'm paying for everything? I marched back inside, my voice steady and cold. You have 10 days to pack your stuff and get out. His face went pale. You can't be serious. Dead serious. I'm done being your ATM. Nick moved in with his dad, and I spent Christmas morning alone with my dog, returning his presents online. By January, things seemed better. His business looked like it was picking up, and he was talking about getting his own place. I agreed to let him move back in under strict conditions, split expenses evenly, or at least handle the housework, and stick to my budget. It worked for a while, but by April, we were back to square one. No chores, me paying for everything. And then he had the nerve to ask me to commit fraud to help him meet his quarterly quota. I lost it. I work in finance. I wasn't about to risk my career for his commission check. The final straw came when I told him I wouldn't be renewing our lease. He followed me around the house that night, bombarding me with questions I'd answered 100 times before. How do you feel about me? What about us? Where will I go? What will it take for you to let me come with you? I was done answering questions he needed to figure out for himself. When I wouldn't engage, he actually hit me with that stupid Marilyn Monroe quote about not deserving someone at their best if you can't handle them at their worst. I just told him he was welcome to walk away if that's how he felt. He spent that night on the couch in the computer room. I decided to go nuclear, changed the Wi-Fi password, froze the credit card I'd given him, started closing our joint accounts. We had plans to attend this big convention in Atlanta over Labor Day weekend, something I'd budgeted for both of us a year ago. I told him he couldn't go unless he paid his half, about $600. Looking back, I should have just told him straight up he wasn't going, but his response told me everything I needed to know. Suddenly he could come up with $1,000 by the end of August? For a party weekend? After months of not being able to buy groceries? I told him great. That money could go toward the $25,000 he owed me before he spent a dime on conventions. He never responded to that text. The next morning, he left with his dog around 9 a.m., leaving all his stuff behind. I piled everything of his under the desk, took down all our pictures, and blocked him everywhere except Facebook and text. Then I went house hunting, put a deposit down on a new place, and spent the rest of the weekend hanging with my neighbor, drinking wine through Twizzlers and taking my dog to the park. The weird thing? That wave of sadness I kept expecting never hit. After he'd been gone 24 hours, I texted him that since his name wasn't on the lease, his claim to residency was gone. He needed to come get his things with 24 hours notice. He tried to come that night, but I held firm on the notice period. He showed up the next evening with his dad's truck and returned my key. When we finally met for coffee to talk things through, it was like we were living in parallel universes. We sat across from each other at our old favorite cafe, both clutching our cups like shields. I just don't understand, he said, staring into his coffee. If you really loved me, really believed in us, why keep track of the money at all? I nearly choked on my latte. Excuse me? Well, if you were planning on spending your life with me, what's mine is yours, right? But you were keeping tabs, treating it like a loan. Like you were waiting for me to fail. Are you serious right now? I set my cup down carefully, trying to keep my voice level. I supported you for over a year. I drained my savings, my trust fund. See? That's exactly what I mean, he interrupted. You're talking about it like a business transaction. Like our relationship was just a series of deposits and withdrawals. Because you made it that way. Every time I needed you to step up, you had another excuse, another promise about how things would get better. I was trying to build something for us. His voice rose, making a few heads turn. But you never really believed in me, did you? My stomach dropped as the truth finally hit me. He actually saw himself as the victim here. In his mind, I was the villain for not bankrupting myself indefinitely to fund his delusions. You're right, I said quietly, gathering my things. I didn't believe enough. I believed in reality instead. That was the moment I knew it was really, truly over. The aftermath was messy. He was telling mutual friends we were going through a rough patch, while my friends were finding his profiles on Tinder and OkCupid. He left that promised $1,000 check in my mailbox while I was at the convention, no postmark, which meant he'd been creeping around my house when he knew I was out of town. His apology email was the best part. He claimed he was too nice and couldn't say no, because his urge to help others made him neglect himself. Right, because draining someone's bank account is totally an act of kindness. I moved to a new place a few streets over. Threw out all our pictures and mementos in the process. Everything in the new house is just me. No us, no him, just me. The strangest part is how quickly he became a stranger. How fast those feelings I was so sure of turned to nothing but embarrassment. Every time I see his picture now, I just cringe at how naive I was to think he was the one. I can't even trust my own feelings anymore. They led me so far off course last time. But maybe that's the point. Maybe sometimes we need to lose everything to figure out what we're really worth. Looking back now, I can't believe I spent $25,000 supporting someone who couldn't see how much I was sacrificing. The irony of a broke financial advisor wasn't lost on me. I miss who he was in those first 6 months, before money problems exposed his immaturity. I miss the dinners out, football games, and movies. I miss that certainty I felt early on that I would marry him. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you have to love yourself more than the person who's dragging you down. It took me way too long to learn that lesson, but at least I finally did. The hardest part isn't even losing him. It's learning to trust my own judgment again. But I'm getting there, one day at a time. I'm focusing on rebuilding my savings, my confidence, and my ability to trust myself. It's not always easy, but it's better than bankrupting myself or someone else's dreams.